On a bone-chilling winter night, an elderly woman named Eleanor Vance opened her front door to find two shivering Doberman Pinscher puppies huddled on her porch. With a gentle heart, Eleanor ushered the little dogs inside and wrapped them in warm blankets. Unaware that this simple act of kindness was about to spark a chain of events she could never have predicted. The following morning, her quiet log cabin, nestled deep within the silent woods, was surrounded. Police cruiser lights flashed red and blue against the snow, and officers shouted commands through the crisp air. Neighbors, had there been any close by, would have whispered in shock. Why were the police swarming Eleanor's property? What trouble had those puppies brought with them? The truth would shock the entire town and change Eleanor's life forever. The conclusion of this tale is surely beyond your imagination, so please stay with me until the very end. Snow was falling softly but heavily upon the pine forests of Montana, absorbing every sound and blanketing the world in white. Deep within these woods, a small, solitary cabin stood firm against the elements, smoke drifting lazily from its stone chimney. Inside, 80-year-old Eleanor brushed the last of the wood ash from her faded wool cardigan. Since her husband passed away nearly 20 years ago, she had lived here alone. It was a quiet life, sometimes too quiet, but she had grown to appreciate it. The world beyond the trees felt rushed and harsh. Here, in the crackle of the firewood and the rhythm of her own steady breathing, she found a semblance of peace. Outside, the darkness of night was descending rapidly. The thermometer hanging on the porch dropped well below freezing, and the low moan of the wind began to slip through the cracks of the old timber walls. Eleanor took a sip of her hot herbal tea and pulled a heavy quilt over her knees. She thought about how few people visited during the winter months. A delivery driver dropped off groceries once a week. But for the most part, the forest and the sky were her only companions. She wasn't afraid of the solitude. In fact, she often spoke to the empty room, telling the shadows that silence was its own kind of music. However, when her eyes drifted to the empty rocking chair across from her, a small, sharp pain would sometimes strike her chest. That chair had been empty for years, triggering quiet memories of days long gone. Tonight felt colder than usual, and a restless anxiety brushed against her mind. She stirred the fire again, listening to the logs hiss and pop. On the mantel, the clock ticked steadily, marking the passing of another ordinary winter night. That silence remained unbroken until an unexpected sound shattered it. It was so faint that she initially thought her mind was playing tricks on her. A distant, whimpering sound carried on the freezing wind. Eleanor paused, her tea mug trembling slightly against her lip. The thin sound came again, high-pitched and broken, like a small cry carried by a gust of air. At first, she thought the old pine trees outside were just groaning under the weight of the snow. But the sound had an urgency to it, a plea that tugged at her heart. She set her mug down and strained her ears, pushing the crackling of the fire into the background. Then she heard it clearly, a thin yelp, followed by a second voice joining in, like an echo of distress. Her first instinct was caution. This forest was home to coyotes, mountain lions, and occasionally bears. But this sound was different, too desperate, too chilled. Pulling a shawl over her shoulders, she grabbed the heavy flashlight she always kept by the door. The metal handle felt cold against her palm. She opened the door, and a gust of frigid air rushed in, stealing the room's warmth and filling her lungs with winter's sharp bite. Moonlight illuminated the porch and the surrounding snow, turning every drift into silver. At first, she saw only the darkness stretching between the trees. Then, a slight movement at the edge of the porch steps caught her eye. Two small shadows were huddled together, shaking violently like leaves in the wind. Eleanor squinted and lowered the flashlight beam. Small eyes reflected the light, staring back at her, terrified and pleading. As she stepped closer, their forms became clear. Two Doberman Pinscher puppies. Their short, smooth black and tan coats offered absolutely no protection against this weather. And their paws were half buried in the accumulation. They looked far too young to be away from their mother. The smaller puppy cried again, a fragile sound threatening to be lost in the swirling wind. The larger puppy leaned against its sibling, as if trying to shield it. A deep wave of compassion rose in Eleanor's chest. Out here, with coats that thin, they wouldn't survive the night. Yet, questions flashed through her mind. Where was the mother? How did they get here? The forest stretched for miles in silence and emptiness. Whatever the answer, the urgency of their cries left no room for hesitation. Eleanor's breath formed small white clouds as she knelt beside the shivering Dobermans. Their sleek fur was soaked with melted snow, and a deep chill radiated from their small, sturdy bodies. The larger puppy lifted its head, staring into her eyes, begging for help. That innocent gaze pierced the old woman's heart. She reached out a gloved hand, moving slowly so as not to frighten them. "It's all right, little ones," she whispered, her voice resonating gently against the howling wind. You're safe now." The smaller puppy hesitated, its ears twitching at the creaking sounds of the forest. But the larger one stepped forward, nose twitching, and leaned into her hand. That quiet trust decided everything. Eleanor scooped her arms under the two Dobermans. Lifting them up, she felt their solid weight, their bodies were trembling violently, and their tiny hearts were hammering against her palms. Without a second thought, she stood up, shielding the puppies from the harsh wind with her shawl, and hurried back inside. Once indoors, the warmth of the fire wrapped around them like a blanket. She placed the puppies on the thick rug near the hearth and quickly shut the door. The sudden brightness made the puppies blink, but they didn't resist. Instead, they leaned against each other, still shivering, though now it wasn't just from fear, exhaustion was setting in. Eleanor grabbed an old towel from the back of her rocking chair and began to rub their small bodies, drying their short fur. Her mind was full of practical worries. They would need food, warm milk, a box to sleep in. But beneath those thoughts, an unexpected tenderness spread through her heart. How many years had it been since something so small and helpless relied on her? A quiet sense of purpose filled the room, melting away the solitude she had accepted for so long. As she warmed some milk in the kitchen, the puppies began to relax, their nubby tails giving a tentative wag. Eleanor smiled, feeling the weight of the freezing night lift from her spirit. She didn't know who they belonged to or how they had found her isolated cabin. She knew only one undeniable fact: she could not abandon them. Tonight, two lost Doberman souls had found a home. The cabin soon filled with a gentle warmth, the steady crackle of the fire mixing with the soft breathing of the puppies. Eleanor poured the warm milk into a shallow bowl and set it gently on the floor. At first, the puppies just sniffed, confused by this new place. But hunger won out. They buried their snouts in the bowl, lapping frantically, their tails wagging with every gulp. A small laugh escaped Eleanor's lips. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since she had laughed aloud. Alone. When the bowl was empty, she wiped their milky faces with the corner of the towel and sat beside them. One puppy climbed into her lap, hooking its small claws into the fabric of her sweater, while the other snuggled tight against her side. Their shivering had stopped, replaced by a slow, trusting warmth. She stroked their velvet ears, marveling at the rhythmic breathing of these little creatures. "You appeared out of nowhere," she murmured, "but maybe you were meant to come here." Outside, the storm was intensifying, wind rattled the skylight, and snow lashed against the windows. But inside, a different kind of quiet reigned, one of peace and companionship. For the first time in years, Eleanor didn't feel the vast emptiness of the surrounding forest. She felt needed. As the night deepened, the puppies watched her every move. When she stood to add a log to the fire, they trotted behind her. When she finally settled into her rocking chair, they curled up at her feet, their breathing perfectly in sync with the creaking of the rocker. She offered a silent prayer of gratitude, her eyes soft and at rest. By midnight, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. The puppies were wrapped in the blanket, twitching their paws as they dreamed. Warm and safe, Eleanor pulled her own quilt closer, letting out a rare sigh of contentment as she closed her eyes. She had no way of knowing that secrets lay hidden in the woods, or that the night's silence would be shattered come daybreak. For now, in the gentle rhythm of the cabin, one old woman and two rescued Dobermans slept as if they had always been together. The first light of morning filtered through the frosted window panes, painting the cabin walls in soft gray. Eleanor woke to a scratching sound. For a moment, she thought it was just the old timber settling in the cold. But then, she heard a low growl. The puppies were awake, tails stiff and ears perked. Instead of the sleepy stretch she expected, they were pacing the hardwood floor, agitated and restless. "Easy now, boys," she whispered, wrapping her shawl tight around her shoulders. But they wouldn't settle. The larger puppy headed for the front door, sniffing intensely at the gap at the bottom. The smaller one circled the rug, letting out short, urgent barks that echoed strangely in the quiet room. Eleanor frowned. They had been so gentle the night before. Now, they were alert, almost aggressive, a glimpse of the formidable guard dogs they would grow up to be. She stood and looked out the window. The forest outside lay silent under a thick blanket of fresh snow. Nothing seemed disturbed, save for faint animal tracks along the tree line. No movement, no visitors. Yet, the puppy's nostrils were flaring, as if catching a scent invisible to her. They darted from the door to the window, growling, scratching at the wood, bodies tense. "Did you see something scary out there?" she murmured, kneeling to soothe them. But when she reached to stroke the larger puppy's back, his body vibrated with a low rumble, not directed at her, but at something beyond the walls, a warning that raised goosebumps on her skin. A nameless anxiety gripped Eleanor. She checked the deadbolt and listened. The forest remained silent, But the Doberman puppies didn't trust that silence. They pressed close together, staring at the window as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge. She threw a fresh log on the fire, trying to shake off a chill that wasn't just from the cold. Last night had been about comfort and rescue. This morning, an invisible tension filled the cabin, brought on by the sharp instincts of two little creatures who seemed to know more about what waited in the snowy woods than she did. The day passed in a quiet haze of falling snow. By evening, the world outside Eleanor's cabin was a sea of white, endless drifts. No footprints, no signs of life. Still, the puppies never truly relaxed. They ate their dinner but kept glancing at the door, ears twitching at every groan of the timber. Their unease weighed on Eleanor like a heavy blanket. As night fell, the storm settled into a fragile calm that felt sharper than the wind. Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, a book on her lap, but her eyes wandered often to the window. The puppies dozed on the rug, but they twitched at sounds she couldn't hear. The ticking of the clock was the only steady rhythm, until it wasn't. Suddenly, a heavy, dull thud broke the silence. It wasn't the creak of wood or the crack of ice. It was a deliberate knock. 3 slow, unmistakable raps on the front door. Eleanor gasped. Visitors were rare in winter, and unheard of after dark without notice. The puppies sprang up, unleashing sharp barks that rang through the small house. The hair on their backs stood up, their small bodies rigid with alarm. Heart pounding, Eleanor set her book aside and stood up. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice surprisingly steady. There was no answer, only the faint whistle of wind through the trees. She grabbed her flashlight and approached softly. Again, 3 rhythmic knocks. Each one sent a vibration through the wooden doorframe. Through the frosted glass, she saw only the shadows of pines and moonlight. No human shape, no footprints on the threshold. The puppies growled low, staring at the door as if sensing something she couldn't perceive. Eleanor hesitated, her hand hovering over the latch. Instinct told her to stay put, but another voice urged a different kind of caution. If someone needed help, this forest could be deadly on a night like this. Torn between fear and compassion, she finally whispered, "Not tonight," and stepped back, sliding the deadbolt firmly into place. The knocking stopped, leaving a profound silence that roared in her ears. But the puppies remained tense for the rest of the night, staring at the door as if the darkness itself were holding its breath. What Eleanor noticed first was the light, brighter than usual, flashing against the walls like a fire. For a second, she feared the cabin was burning. Then came the sound, a sharp, mechanical siren cutting through the dawn silence. The puppies went into a frenzy, barking and rushing the door. Eleanor threw off her blanket, heart racing, and followed them. Outside, the world that had been silent hours ago was now teeming with movement. Red and blue lights pulsed against the snow, painting the pine trees in phantom colors. At least 4 police cruisers were lined up on the narrow track leading to her cabin, their tires half buried in the drifts. Officers in heavy winter gear were fanning out across her yard, their voices stern and urgent. For a breathtaking moment, Eleanor just stared. She had lived in these woods for 20 years without so much as a noise complaint. Why now? Why this? The puppies huddled close, barking at the moving shadows outside. One officer raised a megaphone, his voice echoing over the crunch of boots on snow. "Ma'am, this is the sheriff's department. Stay inside and approach the door slowly when instructed." Her heart rate spiked. Stay inside. The words sounded like a command directed at a dangerous person. Eleanor's mind raced. Was there an accident nearby? A fugitive hiding? She glanced at the door where she had double-locked it after last night's mysterious knocking. A chill ran down her spine. Another officer approached, motioning toward the window, his hand near his holster. Snow kicked up around his boots as he shouted, "Ma'am, please come forward. We need to speak with you immediately." The Doberman puppies barked louder, spinning in circles as if confirming that the danger they felt in the night had arrived with the morning. Eleanor took a shaky breath, her fingers hesitating over the latch. The quiet life she had cherished for decades was gone, replaced by flashing lights, urgent voices, and a mystery that had arrived with the cold. Whatever waited on the other side of that door was about to change everything. Eleanor's hand trembled as she slid the bolt back. She opened the door a crack, and cold air pushed in like a wave. The puppies rushed to her side, growling low but refusing to back down. Outside, several officers stood with grim faces, their breath misting in the freezing morning air. The closest officer, a tall man in a dark winter coat with a badge gleaming on his chest, raised a gloved hand in a calming gesture. "Ma'am, please step out where we can see you," he said firmly, but not without kindness. "You're safe, but we need to talk." Safe. The word rang strange. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. She had nothing to hide. She lived alone, paid her taxes, and spoke to no one but the grocery delivery boy. Yet the sight of so many uniforms on her quiet property felt surreal. Like stepping into someone else's nightmare. "What on earth is going on?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you all here?" The officer exchanged a look with a colleague, a female deputy scanning the tree line with wary eyes. "We'll explain everything shortly," he said. "First, we need to verify that everyone inside is okay. Are you alone?" Eleanor hesitated, bristling at the question. "Just me," she said finally, "and 2 Doberman puppies I found last night." At the mention of the dogs, several officers stiffened. One raised his radio to his mouth, speaking quickly. The young female deputy's gaze sharpened. She stepped closer, crouching slightly to peer at the puppies pressing protectively against Eleanor's legs. Their sudden alertness deepened Eleanor's anxiety. "Ma'am," the tall officer, Sheriff Miller, continued cautiously. "Late last night, did anyone else come to your door? Did you hear or see anything unusual?" The memory of the deliberate midnight knock flashed in her mind. She gasped. She hadn't told anyone. "Someone came," she admitted slowly, "but no one answered when I called out." The sheriff's jaw tightened. Radios crackled around them, carrying voices and coded numbers. Whatever had happened in the woods, it wasn't an accident. And now, Eleanor stood at the center of something much larger than a quiet night and 2 lost dogs. As Eleanor stepped fully onto the porch, the chill pierced through her sweater. The 2 puppies swarmed around her ankles, barking at the strangers. An officer motioned gently for her to keep him close. "Ma'am," he said, his breath visible in the frigid air, "we have some urgent questions." His tone carried a weight that tightened the knot in her chest. Eleanor gripped the doorframe. I don't understand. I live alone. I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice shook, lost in the wind. Sheriff Miller took a careful step forward. "We aren't saying you did anything wrong. But something serious happened near here late last night. A major incident occurred not far away around midnight. We have reason to believe someone passed through this area, possibly approaching your house." The memory of the 3 slow, deliberate knocks played over in her head, and her heart pounded. The puppies had known. They had sensed what she couldn't. "Did you hear any unusual sounds?" another deputy asked, his eyes sweeping every corner of the porch. "Voices, vehicles, footsteps?" Eleanor swallowed hard. "Just 3 knocks. I called out, but no one answered. When I looked, there wasn't a soul in sight." The female deputy exchanged a sharp glance with her partner. "Ma'am, are you certain there was absolutely no one? No movement at all?" "Yes." Eleanor's voice was firmer now. "Just darkness and snow." Their belt radios crackled with static and broken words. "Evidence located. Possible tracks heading to the ridge. Proceed with caution." The officer's posture instantly stiffened. Sheriff Miller stared at the Doberman puppies. "And these dogs, how did they come to you?" Eleanor explained how she found them shivering on the porch, how desperate they looked to get inside. As she spoke, she realized how strange it sounded. 2 abandoned Doberman puppies, a midnight knock, and now armed police at her door. Sheriff Miller nodded slowly, jaw set. "Ma'am, those puppies might not just be strays. They might have come here following someone, or something. We need to know everything they did inside your house. Everywhere they went." The words hit Eleanor like a sudden gust of ice. Not just strays. She looked down at the puppies, now sitting side by side, their little chests heaving in a nervous rhythm. They looked up at her with trusting eyes, but their ears were swiveling toward every sound in the forest, as if still on a mission. The sheriff's radio crackled again. A determined voice came through. "Sheriff, we found something on the north trail. Blood and fresh boot prints. Human, heading straight for the cabin." Every officer around Eleanor tensed. The female deputy's hand moved instinctively near her sidearm. Eleanor felt her stomach churn. "Blood?" she whispered. Sheriff Miller nodded grimly. "Ma'am, we have reason to believe these dogs might have witnessed a violent crime last night. Someone injured tried to seek shelter here, or maybe hide something nearby." As if to emphasize his words, the smaller puppy let out a sharp bark, ran to the edge of the porch railing, and sniffed frantically. The larger puppy followed, scratching at the corner of the floorboards. Eleanor blinked in confusion. The spot looked perfectly normal, just snow and old wood. A deputy moved in to check where the puppy was scratching. He brushed aside a layer of snow and frowned. "Sheriff," he called out, voice tense, "you need to see this." The group gathered as he lifted a loose floorboard to reveal a small, dark object, a torn piece of fabric stained deep red. Eleanor gasped. The puppies began to growl, circling the spot as if urging everyone to look deeper. The sheriff's face hardened. "This isn't just a dog rescue," he said quietly. "Someone bled here, and not too long ago." He stood straight, scanning the tree line. "Lock this area down. No one in or out until forensics arrives." Eleanor's knees went weak. She clung to the porch railing for support. The morning cold was nothing compared to the chill encasing her heart. She had welcomed these creatures out of pure compassion. Now, it seemed they had brought the trail of a crime right to her doorstep. The smaller puppy gave one last sharp bark. Looking back at her, its eyes shone with something almost human, as if saying the mystery wasn't over yet. Eleanor shivered. The quiet world she knew was gone, replaced by a dark puzzle that these sharp-witted little Dobermans had dragged from the night into the harsh light of day. Sheriff Miller lowered his radio and turned to Eleanor. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "think carefully. In the past day or two, has any stranger approached your house? Even before last night?" Eleanor shook her head, replaying every detail of her quiet week. "No one," she said finally. "Visitors are rare in winter. Just the delivery boy, and that was 3 days ago." Her mind replayed the memory of the midnight knock. "Except for that knock," she said softly, "I never saw who it was." The young female deputy was examining the disturbed snow near where the fabric was found. "Sheriff, look at this," she called out. Under the top layer of powder, there were faint impressions, larger than any animal, but strangely dragging. As she carefully brushed away the snow, the shape became clear, the print of a heavy boot, half obscured by blood. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Matches the intel from HQ. We're tracking a suspect who fled a violent robbery in town last night. He's wounded, armed, and was last seen heading into these woods." He turned to Eleanor, his voice low but urgent. "Ma'am, those puppies either followed him or were abandoned by him. Either way, they might be our best lead." Eleanor blinked in shock. "You mean the dogs were with him?" "It's possible," the deputy replied. "Criminals sometimes use animals to throw off trackers. Or maybe they escaped and led us straight here. Either way, they know something we don't." As if on cue, the larger puppy walked to the porch steps, pressing his nose against the frozen planks. He let out a short, powerful bark and bolted into the yard. Stopping to look back, the smaller puppy followed, tail rigid. Sheriff Miller watched, a spark of recognition in his eyes. "They're showing us the way." He signaled his team, "Follow them, but keep your distance, this guy is dangerous." Eleanor held her breath as she watched the two small Dobermans move through the snow with strange purpose. Noses working the ground, what she thought were just abandoned puppies might have been the main reason the police found her house so quickly. The little creatures she saved were now revealing the path of a criminal hiding somewhere in the freezing woods. The sheriff turned to her, his voice a mix of gratitude and gravity. "Ma'am, if it weren't for these dogs, and if you hadn't let 'em in, we might never have known where to look next." The larger Doberman kept his nose low, moving fast through the snow, every movement purposeful and sharp. The smaller one followed close behind, pausing occasionally to look back at Eleanor and the trailing officers. The forest, silent only hours ago, now seemed to hold its breath, branches creaking softly around them. Sheriff Miller signaled the squad to spread out but keep a visual on the dogs. "Stay alert," he warned in a low voice. "If the suspect is wounded, he could be desperate." Radios crackled with updates from officers confirming the boot prints matched the earlier tracks. Eleanor stayed back, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She had brought the puppies in to protect them, but now, they were leading strangers into danger. Yet, the determination in their small bodies was unmistakable. These weren't lost pets anymore. They moved like seasoned trackers, every bark and sudden dart indicating the path. They followed the dogs deeper into the woods until the puppies stopped abruptly near a dense thicket of spruce trees. The larger one growled low, pawing at a semi-buried mound of snow near the tree roots. An officer approached cautiously, brushing away the snow. He stiffened. Beneath it lay a canvas duffel bag, stained with dried blood, partially unzipped to reveal bundles of cash and the glint of a rusted pistol. "Evidence from the robbery," the sheriff confirmed, voice tense. He quickly radioed orders. "Asset secured. Suspect can't be far. Perimeter tight." While the squad secured the area, the Doberman puppies continued to circle, barking incessantly toward a narrow ravine beyond the trees. An officer crept forward and signaled. "Fresh tracks going down the slope," he reported, "still bleeding." Sheriff Miller turned to Eleanor, his expression softening despite the urgency. "Ma'am, these dogs didn't just wander to your porch. They've been guiding you, and now all of us, the whole time. They might have saved more lives than we know." Eleanor felt a rush of awe and fear as she watched the puppies pawing at the hidden evidence. What she thought was a simple act of kindness, opening her door to two stray Dobermans, was turning out to be something far greater. These animals were more than victims of the cold, they were brave little witnesses. Loyal guardians, and the key to bringing a dangerous man to justice. The forest went eerily quiet as the officers moved to surround the ravine. Snow crunched softly under their boots. Every step calculated. The two puppies stood at the edge, noses twitching, their sharp barks echoing like an alarm through the trees. Sheriff Miller raised a hand, signaling for silence. Everyone froze, listening. From the shadows below came a sound, too heavy for a squirrel, too controlled for falling snow. The sheriff set his jaw. "He's down there," he whispered, cornered. He turned to Eleanor, eyes narrowed in concern. "Ma'am, step back toward the house for your safety." But Eleanor didn't move. Something inside her refused to leave. She thought of the midnight knock, the bloody cloth hidden under her porch, and the terrified puppies that had come to her. Fear coursed through her veins. But another feeling rose stronger, resolve. "These little ones trusted me first," she said quietly. "I won't abandon them now." The sheriff hesitated, reading the determination on her weathered face. Finally, he nodded. "Stay behind me, no sudden movements." Suddenly, the puppies gave a sharp, unified bark and went silent, eyes locked on a dark overhang in the snowbank. A moment later, a man stumbled into view, ragged, wearing a torn jacket, his face gaunt and pale, one arm wrapped in bloody cloth. He looked frantically around, trying to scramble up the opposite slope. "Freeze! Sheriff's Department!" Miller's voice boomed through the frigid air. Officers raised their weapons, but Eleanor stepped forward just enough for her voice to carry. "It's over, son," she called out, her tone calm, almost motherly. "Don't make this worse. You're hurt. Let him help you." The man froze, chest heaving. For a second, only the quiet hum of the forest filled the air. Then, he collapsed to his knees, the fight draining out of him. Officers moved in quickly, handcuffing him and securing a weapon tucked under his coat. Relief swept through the group like a sudden warm breeze. Sheriff Miller turned to Eleanor with a look of deep respect. "Ma'am, you might have just prevented a tragedy. Your calm likely saved lives, including his." Eleanor exhaled, feeling the puppies lean against her boots, their small bodies vibrating with pride. She knelt and stroked their heads, whispering softly, "Good job, my brave boys, we did it together." As snowflakes fell silently, officers escorted the arrested man up the hill. He slumped, his wounded arm wrapped in makeshift bandages. Flashing lights from the cruisers painted long streaks of red and blue across the white snow, dyeing the forest in surreal colors. Eleanor stood by her porch, the two Dobermans pressed tight against her legs, watching numbly as the long night of terror finally turned into a calm, victorious morning. Sheriff Miller approached with a steady stride, his breath rising white in the cold. "It's done," he said quietly, sounding relieved. "Suspects secured, stolen money and weapon recovered. Thanks to you and these little heroes. We closed this case before anyone else got hurt." Eleanor blinked, still processing the whirlwind of the last 12 hours. "I just opened a door," she murmured, almost to herself. "The puppies, they were the ones who knew." Sheriff Miller smiled a small, genuine smile. "Maybe so, but you trusted their instincts. And you kept your cool when it mattered. That made all the difference." He crouched down, gently ruffling the soft, black and tan fur of the puppies. They wagged their tails proudly, soaking up the praise. "I'm going to make sure the department officially recognizes their role in this. They deserve it." Officers moved around the yard, photographing the hidden evidence and sealing the bag of stolen money. Others offered Eleanor hot coffee from a thermos, checking if she was unhurt. Each thanked her in quiet, sincere tones. Despite the cold, the atmosphere carried a strange warmth, relief and gratitude replacing the night's tension. As the last cruiser prepared to leave with the handcuffed man in the back, Sheriff Miller turned to Eleanor one last time. "You might get some questions from investigators in town," he explained, "but for now, the danger is gone. You and these puppies can finally rest." Eleanor let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. She looked down at the puppies, their bright eyes shining in the morning light. They had brought chaos to her doorstep, but also courage and an unexpected companionship. "You came here for a reason, didn't you?" she whispered softly. The larger puppy gave a soft woof, a quiet answer in the snowy expanse. It felt less like coincidence and more like fate, that two brave little creatures had found her at exactly the right moment to change everything. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the glistening snow, but Eleanor hardly felt the cold. She stood on her porch, two Dobermans leaning against her wool skirt, warmth radiating from their small bodies. The sheriff's final words echoed in her mind, "You and these dogs can finally rest." After a night of fear and mystery, a deep, quiet peace wrapped around the little cabin. Inside, the fire burned steadily, casting a soft orange glow across the room. Eleanor brewed fresh tea and set down a bowl of warm milk for her uninvited guests. The larger puppy stepped forward, tail wagging, and the smaller one followed with a happy yip. Watching him lap up the milk, Eleanor felt a gentle wave of gratitude wash over her. What began as a simple act of mercy, opening a door to two freezing animals, had turned into a chance to save a life and rediscover a purpose. That afternoon, Sheriff Miller returned briefly, this time without the urgency. He handed her a neatly folded paper, a small token of thanks from the department. He said with kind eyes, "And don't forget, these little guys are heroes in their own right. If you like, we can help find them a home, though it looks like they've already found one." Eleanor smiled, a rare warmth lighting up her weathered face. "This is their home," she said simply. As if understanding, the puppies climbed into her lap and curled up, sealing the decision themselves. Before leaving, the sheriff tipped his hat. "You know, ma'am," he said, "most folks would have ignored that knock. Your kindness didn't just save these dogs, it helped catch a dangerous man. The town owes you more than thanks." As twilight fell, Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, the puppies sleeping beside her, their soft breathing filling the quiet room. For years, she had lived in solitude, believing her days of making a difference were over. Now, with two brave little friends by her side, she felt something she hadn't felt in ages, needed, alive, and deeply connected to the world beyond the woods. She stroked their soft ears and whispered with a smile, "You were meant to find me." Outside, the forest lay peaceful and safe, as if nature itself understood that this unexpected family was exactly where it belonged.